like whatever we did
We
3 or
exist
4.
at the same time.
Yeah. It's just so that people know that we existed at the same time. Um, all right, we'll do the part where oh no, then the lag is confusing. The lag is so confusing. Need to,
Wait, why do
uh,
we? Oh, you mean with the people watching?
you're like, oh, is this working? And then you're like, oh wait, it like takes 5 seconds to even
Oh
see it
yeah.
appear on YouTube. Anyway, whatever. Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm going to be in LA. What was the next part of that? Oh, but I will. Yeah, but then hopefully maybe I'll see you after that.
Yeah.
Although at least we're in the same time zone.
I mean, I can't
Um,
mean if she comes to my coast, you know.
yeah, I mean, she's here in the Bay a lot, I think. So
She is because her grandma and her family's there. Yeah.
yeah, you gotta come up here. Come here. We have room for you. Okay, I'm not sure if the rest of the internet is interested in this part.
Wait, are we live now?
Yeah.
Oh, hey. Hi, rest of you.
Do you want to introduce yourself? Sometimes I ask people that, and sometimes I don't. I feel like you could also put it in the description.
I can't
Tell
say no.
tell the
No.
tell the yeah tell the people of the internet what you're
Uh,
doing now or something. I don't know. Or how do you do your own bio? I don't know if I could do it.
I'm not comfortable with bios, so it's a weird thing for me.
Tell me about
Um,
it.
the big ask.
Yeah,
Uh, I'm Alex Matzner. I worked at Tlon 2018, 2019.
something
Sounds
like
right.
that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I had an event company called Y3K, experiential events. And now I work at Comma, running operations, trying to solve self-driving cars in San Diego.
That's the craziest part of your bio.
We just launched a robot. There's a lot going on right now.
Really? Wait, what's the robot do?
It's called the body. It's just
The
like a
body? Like it's a.
little
Do I
guy.
wear it?
He moves.
Oh,
No, no, no. He, she, it. It's just like kind of like a stick. It looks like a drawing of a person, like a child drew. We turned that into a primitive prototype robot. Yeah,
well,
yeah.
that sounds fun. So is it like a kind of like a maker type of, is it aimed at like, it's like, hey, this is this thing that has,
It's a robotics dev kit. Um,
okay, that's cool.
yeah, we did a real fun little soft launch. You can watch it on YouTube on Com AI.
Yeah, I'll check that out. That sounds, well, yeah, obviously, have
I
you
was on
played?
them. It was quite cute. Um,
But is it purely like for fun? Like what's the like demographic, who's this for?
Galen is for everybody. Robots are for all people. In fact, they're so for us, they become us.
That,
um,
I,
that's
I'm
it
gonna have
now.
to think about that for a while.
It has a comma 3 on top, and you can use the comma 3 to kind of move it around. But eventually, we're hoping to build like a full robotic experience, like full sci-fi, take over the world,
But like
robots.
you use it, you're like, oh, I could use, are you like, oh, I need some garden help. I just
That's
use some
correct. Any job that a scarecrow could do, the body is good at.
Actually, that's a,
Yeah.
yeah, right. It's a scarecrow, but it moves around a little bit. It walks around the field. That makes sense.
You know,
Oh, yeah.
very I mean we're thinking about like remote security, there's like a team in the
Hmm,
Philippines. They run the security bots around and tell you
got
about
it.
yeah, yeah, but it moves
Definitely has
a
some dystopian vibes. Like some scary outcomes there. I think I've talked to George about the many scary outcomes of Comma's technology, even
there's a
before
lot
it was just
of price,
robots.
but the dream is that the body, we're going to send them to Phoenix, Arizona, and they're going to open a donut shop for us, and then every week they're going to bring us cash from the donut shop.
Um,
our donut robots, they have a donut store, so
I feel like you should make it closer and they should bring you actual donuts.
that too. When they bring us the money, they also bring a box of donuts, like the leftovers, whatever is unsold for the day. But they usually
Donuts
just
are like,
because they know exactly how many donuts to produce.
right, they don't have extra. Uh, Donuts are something I eat like once a year and both always enjoy and always regret.
Same,
And
same.
which always makes me wonder why it's possible for there to be so many donut shops. Like it's
In
such a,
California, in particular, there seems to be like an absurd amount of donut shop.
yeah. Well, the
Right
Bay
now,
Area too, there's like a whole thing.
we did not have we had Dunkin' Donuts. There was like one
Yeah,
neighborhood donut shop, and that was it. Yeah,
yeah,
I don't know
that's
why
weird.
there's so many here, but
Well,
the
we're
team,
not the people to get to the bottom of
yeah,
this problem.
it's going to
Uh,
become investigative journalism show where we Well, there's so many donut shops. It reminds me of like the mattress firm conspiracies about them being money laundering because there's so many mattress
Oh,
firms, like just high density. It's like not possible that people could need mattresses in this level of demand, you know.
I haven't heard that one. That makes sense. Yeah,
Oh,
I
man,
mean,
this is a classic conspiracy theory.
huh, I guess
Money
uh,
laundering, mattress firm, you know, makes a lot of sense.
it does make a lot of sense. That's the problem. I feel like that's the classic. Someone tells you conspiracy theory, and you're like, yeah, that makes sense. uh, okay, let's go. The original conceit of this was to talk about like the key ceremony that we did in 2018.
December, yeah.
No, but it was 27. See this? Okay, so when the
I'm
urban address space,
both of our memories, we should be able to reconstruct this.
yeah. So for like what you can like, I'll try and give the lead up and the rationale for doing this, and then we can get into what we actually did.
Okay.
So at first, Urbit is a who knows what happened from 2002 to 2013, but some time during that, extended psychedelic experience of building system software, like the idea of a node on this network is a piece of cryptographic property is invented. I think there's some blog posts from, an ancient history that someone can dig up where like that idea is like everyone always talk about, and I am now remembering and often forget that that's an idea that predates Bitcoin. So it's like in that 2006 to
So
2008 range.
yeah.
Yeah, like that was the idea. But of course, one of the problems with that idea is like, well, then how do you bootstrap security in that network, right? Like, how do you distribute that initial set of keys? So it's the idea is if I own a node in this network and then there's some rights about how I can distribute, I can like issue a new node or I can give someone a username basically, or I give someone the right to issue more names without getting into the like structure of the address space, which is obviously well documented. The problem is like where do those initial keys come from? Like you have to get them somewhere. And this is a problem for all networks. And so we just punted on it for a long time, even since I got involved in the when we were because we were too small. We're like five people.
It was just like a ledger, right? You guys had just like kind of had a
Yeah.
document like this thing belongs to this person.
Right. So we just kept a record of like who we had sort of promised to give what. And then in many cases we kept a record of what we gave out and we expected like if we gave you there were periods in those early days where like if you had a star or a galaxy, you could issue other addresses, but we're like we don't keep track of your records. So like you should keep track of
Right. I
who you
remember
give
that
addresses to.
hands-off approach. Do the
Which
people like
is
history? Do you want to
crazy.
tell them about how Curtis first got namespace out into the world? He sent it on email,
Like
I
through the
think, yeah, about us the first sale.
Do I even remember? Well, I mean, well, so I'm thinking you mean that yes, our crowd sales were those were things that what that was by the time I was involved. So
Okay.
Curtis gave away a bunch of address space to people who just like I think there was a knock competition. So by the time knock was done, which was yeah, in that early Bitcoin
I
days,
vaguely remember this. I think I've met some people who acquired address space through the competition.
there you go. Yeah, so some of those people are still around. Wait, I haven't even given the outlines of this conversation. So I'm just describing why you have to distribute keys. But just to compress it, when we at some point had a backlog of all these people we'd promised address space to and we wanted to actually make that real, we decided to do that through a set of Ethereum contracts. Those contracts are still alive. Someday they may go away. We can talk about that too if it's interesting. But we went through we designed and executed a key ceremony for like initiating the like sort of first block of ownership on the Ethereum chain. And we did that in a relatively insane way that nobody knows about because we didn't want to in any way compromise the potential, like compromise the security of those keys. So we looked a lot at what Zcash has done. So the best other example of this is Zcash, which is like very well documented, where they went out and did this crazy ceremony to basically
I
generate.
read the Zcash.
Really? Well, everyone who you were working with at that time had read that very closely because we were trying to figure out what we would borrow and what we would change.
I think I only
Um,
got the ICANN ceremonies.
yeah,
That's when I
right.
first heard about the key ceremony as a concept, I think.
Really? The funny thing is, I don't remember those as well.
I think
Hey, the point of this conversation has never been documented because
yeah,
it
yeah.
didn't. Zcash made a big deal of it, and I won't. I mean, is that a good idea or not? I don't know, but it made me uncomfortable to document too thoroughly how we
Me
had
too.
done it. it didn't make sense. It also exposed everybody involved to it's an OPSEC error basically. So now we've moved to different custody solution. And
Right.
so all of that, all those keys have been cycled anyway. So now I feel like we can talk about it, and it doesn't matter because none of the keys are valuable. Although who knows? Someday when you can, replay the entire universe through a computer, perhaps this is an issue. But I'm not really that worried about it.
I was always so worried about someone leaking information that, and I have such a good memory that basically during the entire process, I was like, do not remember any of this. Like I was like actively like, don't remember, don't remember, don't remember,
Well, it's 4 years later, so like,
even though I was there.
right. So we're gonna try to reconstruct through our both of our lacking memories what we actually did ideally. Wait, and you still have it, and I've also always thought there's a camera somewhere. Remember, we were trying to find an old digital camera, like a
Yes.
Canon, and you had this old Canon EOS camera from like college, yeah, that we used to document the actual physical event, which was pretty amazing for like aesthetic reasons that we'll get into.
Forgot about that. Do we have the SD card from that somewhere?
I'm pretty sure it's like locked somewhere in the office. Yeah.
I see like in the camouflage bag with some of the hard drives.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did
Yeah. Well, they're just the like
ever,
completely destroyed hard drives. What's that?
did your friend ever turn it into art?
No, we never convinced her to do that. Although that would be an open. Now it could be. Well, now it's less important because they've
Yeah,
been cite. Although it's kind of interesting.
it's true.
Anyway, let's try and start at the beginning. So, okay, so we have all these. So we had done a few crowd sales where we'd actually sold assets, to people that were not real assets. I mean, and we'd intended to make them into real assets. Um, and I mean, obviously, people had every reason to trust us, and they did in fact get those assets. But there was just just like a ledger of who we owe what, and so that happened in 2016 and 2017. Is that right? No, 2015 and 2016, and then in 2017 early 2017 is when Tlon started to grow. No, am I fucking this up? No, it was 2016, 2017.
2018.
Early 2018, yeah, it's like early because 2017 was ICO craze, and then right at the tail end of that is when Tlon privately sold some address space and grew, which is when you sort of toward the tail end of that growth is when you joined
Yeah,
in
20.
like the summer of 2018.
Yes.
Right. And then our goal was to by the end of 2018, right, get the address space on chain, which I
Yes.
think we pulled off. Right. So
We
this happened.
like a real hard stop, like a contractual obligation, I think, in January, the second week of January.
That's right. Yeah. Because Tlon went out and sold some address space where we were like, I think in those contracts, we explicitly promised there's like a few milestones that we wanted to hit. And the first one was we'll get the address space on chain by January 8th or something of
Yeah. It
2019.
was really early at the beginning of the year, very stressful, I remember.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we wanted to actually, there were a bunch of reasons why we wanted to do it. We also just didn't want the liability of like actually holding anyone's assets. Like we wanted to actually
It
be
was
done with this thing.
starting to become more and more risky, for sure.
Yeah. So I wonder when the Zcash ceremony is. We should have looked that up. The main thing I want to replay is the actual day of doing this. So I'm trying to think of like, we spent like the thing that also hasn't been discussed very much, which we need to talk about more, which is actually your feedback on that thing I sent you recently, right? Is just like what the fuck we've been doing for all these years.
It
And
was
so 2018,
Cash one.
it was 2017 or
2018,
2018.
they posted about it. Yeah.
Yeah, it must
2016
have been.
happened. And they recorded it live on YouTube.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I guess we should go watch. We should watch that.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
so yeah, 2018 is a year where we haven't ever talked that much about what we were doing in large part because this is a big part of what we were doing. And we were also engineering all the contracts. So the rough logic of those contracts actually had been written in 2017. And in 2018, we spent auditing the contracts, but we always knew we'd have to initiate them somehow. And that all the keys for initiating them had to be generated in some secure fashion. This is also before, while there were hardware wallets at that point, they were still, a lot of that stuff wasn't as good as it is today. Um,
Yeah, definitely not.
I remember us, like, there was like an abundance of ledgers and treasures, but like,
Yeah.
yeah, it was a
I
mess.
2017 was maybe when I first got my first ledger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sounds
there weren't as many hardware wallets involved in this process as there like would be if you did this today. Um, But anyway, we knew we had this cutoff of January, whatever, like first week of January. We also knew that actually deploying the contracts to the chain was going to take a really long time, just in terms of like the literal time it would take to upload all of the like to get everything properly deployed. So I think our cutoff for finishing the key ceremony was like early December, right?
Yes, we did it December like 7th or 8th, I think, around there. We had to
Got
like
it. Yeah.
work with everyone's schedules. Certain people had to be involved. Um,
Right. But
remember
then
being
before that, we had to collect and we had to have everybody generate keys, right? So
December 18th was the date of the ceremony. We can talk about it. Here's a picture. Let me see.
there we go. That's what I'm looking for. How do you have that on your phone? That's amazing.
Yeah, I got a couple pictures. We took this outside. We decided it was safe.
But that's all. We were worried about geotagging that location that we ended up picking, right? Um,
Afterwards. Yeah, we were worried about it. So I like shut my phone off. We put all the phones in a Faraday cage,
right.
Faraday bags. Um, there was so many levels of paranoia. I've never been so paranoid for just like a solid 2 months of my life than that November, October, November, December. I think it really took like a full month to plan the whole thing, a month and two
That,
weeks.
yeah,
We
that
had,
makes sense.
we had to
All right,
open.
let's just try and walk through what we actually did during that day. Like,
You want to talk
wait,
about the day. You don't want to talk about like the work up to the day. You want to go straight to the day.
I don't know. How do you want to do this? I just want to make sure that we try and remember what actually happened on that day.
Okay. Well, I think you need a little more context. So
Sure. All right. Well, you maybe remember better than I do what was going on before then. We had to collect, I remember we also had to collect keys, right? So we had to create this whole way that other people could go and
there's two
client
parts.
side generate
There's two
keys.
parts.
Yeah.
It was my part, which was the ceremony, and then
Hmm.
the other team's part, which was just the software and the generation, the tools, the
Right.
mechanism had to work day of to generate everything.
Yeah.
I never touched that except the day before the ceremony. But
Cool. Okay, that makes sense.
I remember it was November, and
Yeah.
I sat down maybe with like Curtis, Morgan, you, Eric, and you guys caught me up to date where you were. And
Yeah.
essentially, you wanted like a piece of performance art. We're talking about like
Yeah.
costumes, robes. We're like, I was looking at like an arena board with like inspo pictures. We were gonna make like a
That's
Kubrick
Morgan.
film. We were
Sure.
talking. You guys were talking to like multiple filmmakers about maybe documenting it while we were doing it. And there was this like, no, there was a lofty vision. And I was like, wait, we have to do this by what day? There's no way. And there was like a really, really primitive document someone had put together of like what they thought might happen at this ceremony.
I am
Um,
both responsible for that and am like, I don't think that could not have possibly been my idea, but
No, I think it was Morgan. I think Morgan was behind this like
sure.
grand vision of like some kind of performance art. And I imagined us like all wearing, these robes and masks and it was very
Okay.
like culty. And I was like, all right, I'm really into this, but I don't think we have the time for the artistic vision because
Yeah.
the amount of practical elements required is so lofty. Um,
Yeah.
so
I mean, yeah.
the goal was to figure out like where there was high vulnerability in the process and then create as much you know preventative measures as possible to prevent someone from figuring out what we were doing. So there was like the generation of the shards for all the galaxies. There's like 3 pieces of each, right?
Yeah.
And then they had to each go to a different physical location to be
Right.
considered safely stored. So the
We
goal
should
was,
probably even back up and explain like each one of these assets is insanely valuable, even at the time, right?
yeah, oh yeah.
Um, I mean, at the time, I think a galaxy was basically $1 million, and so you have an asset that costs $1 million, or that has some trading volume at $1 million, and the key that holds that asset, which is basically like a big random number, like the generation of that random number and everything about the conditions under which you generated it, like cannot leak because you can't leak there can be no risk of someone being able to reproduce that number or even the entire space of possible reproductions of that number.
Right.
That's what I think of as like the general, just
Yeah,
the
yeah, no,
preconditions for.
you
Yeah.
nailed it. And so you had tasked me with creating a day which we could safely generate all of these keys and safely store them. So that was
Right.
the goal of the key ceremony, which
Right.
was
So yeah, ultimately you end up with this number. It's really valuable, and I mean, what do you do with that? Like that number is as good as cash, so you need to be able to put it somewhere where, like, ideally no one actually knows where you put it, but even if they knew where you put it, like it's still safe.
yes. And I think there's like kind of like an illegal expectation that you're keeping this to a minimum degree level of safe as an organization generating it. That
Wait,
you
what
have
do you mean
done.
by that? Like,
There's like
yeah, yeah.
storing these with a certain level of security, like a minimum level
Yeah,
of
yeah, yeah.
security.
Like we're doing like that. We're serving our like fiduciary duty as a company to our assets. Yeah, definitely.
Exactly. So I was like, all right, this is an interesting challenge. I don't know very much about storing, high value objects in safe places. I was like, should we go to Switzerland? I think that was the first thought,
Yep.
because that's obviously where you store anything of value.
Yeah.
Uh, and the good news about these things is that they were small.
Right.
And then it became very clear quickly that we need to take these to a safety deposit boxes or some, physically safe place. We couldn't bury the cash in the ground like drug dealers.
Right. Well, all right. So one way around the problem of, okay, you have this $1 million asset that's as good as cash, and you put it in a box somewhere. Okay, then that box is a single point of failure is that you shard them and you have some M of N requirement where you need, 5 of 7 or whatever. And we just settled on 2 of 3. So you generate a giant number, you cut it in 3 parts, and then, well, yeah, but where they're overlapping such that you only need 2 out of the 3 of them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, And it should be mentioned while we tasked you with a lot of the operational side of this, which obviously you're still, or you continue to get better at handling, building a. I wonder whether, I mean, is building a like a robot and actually getting it out into the world more complicated than design? Like, if someone is handling the technical requirements of how to do a key ceremony, it seems like the operational side of it is.
A natural transition for me. I always think that I was the right person for the key ceremony because I knew what a key ceremony was before given the job, and I told so many people at the time, like, what do you do? And I'm like, oh, I'm working on a key ceremony, and absolutely no one knew what a key ceremony was. And that's how I was like, I think that I'm the right person for this job.
Okay, right, yeah, I
So
felt
knowing what
that
the
way
job
basically too.
is.
We should all, it's also worth mentioning like the thing is that, most people who even at the time, like you unwrap a ledger
Yeah.
and it is basically performing a key ceremony on your behalf the minute that you boot it, right?
Yes.
Like
Yes.
it's generating that initial entropy. I'm trying to remember what the ledger process is, but it has you like enters kind of add some randomness to what is
Yeah.
otherwise also generated on the hardware. The
Yeah.
problem is when you're trying to custody really high value assets, and there are other solutions for this now, but like is that basically like that whole chain of custody of how you got that thing that's going to generate that random number is like super super questionable and super important. So if for some reason it comes out later that like the algorithm for generating entropy that's on that piece of hardware is compromised somehow, meaning someone actually up the chain of custody, at the ledger factory had like injected something into that hardware, then the whole thing is broken, right? And so yeah,
We
generating the entropy is the primary problem.
yeah, a hefty amount of fear in every part of the process. If there was a bad actor, what might they do and how might we avoid them manipulating the process, including inside threats, right? Which is
Yep.
employees,
Yep.
which is, I think, one of the biggest risks, right?
Yeah.
With these things, exactly what you said, a ledger, a factory employee, someone in close to the process is usually the most responsible for manipulating the process.
Right. Yeah. And then if you're going to do it yourself, it's like the people involved and then all of the hardware involved. And so I
Yeah.
remember like I imagine the lead up was basically like you guys, properly air gapping a bunch of computers and getting all of this hardware into the office. But maybe you want to walk through what you remember there, because I just remember all of it appearing.
It did magic. Well,
I mean, it talked about the process a lot. Like Curtis and I worked really hard on the process, and then you guys would we would go back and forth on like whether or not this actually was gonna work.
I was constantly trying to figure out what was too far, because usually you don't
Sure.
want to spend too much time in the weeds when it's just like really, really low risk. So we did get computers. We didn't use any Google tools. The computers never went on the internet. I did all of my planning and scheduling on this air gapped machine,
Right.
and I
Yep.
left it at the office, like locked, whatever. It was kept pretty safe. I think I also kept things
And
on.
those weren't those air gap machines basically bought with cash in person at various
So
locations or something like that?
So that was my computer that I used to plan the
Got
event.
it.
Then the day of, we had to have 3 computers
Okay.
to generate the keys. So I think maybe we're going to talk about the outline of the day, which was that we decided we were
Sure.
going to randomly select a bunch of employees to
Yep.
help us work and generate all the keys, which we decided we would print out on sheets of
Right.
paper, store in fireproof bags, ultimately, and inside individually wrapped and sealed and numbered bags.
Right.
Um,
And
of,
those had to be printed out on site on a printer that has never been on the internet and ideally cannot go on the internet on archival paper in a
yes,
way that, yeah, because the printed artifact is the final
yes,
output, and it
yes,
lives nowhere. Ideally, it lives nowhere other than like that physical artifact is the only artifact. There is not a digital copy. There are not multiple
copy,
copies. Yeah.
and everything in our power to have along the way prevented someone from documenting or making a copy or manipulating the outcome. Um, so yeah, we chose random locations. I think we used breathers, like that app. We
Yeah.
decided the morning of first we rolled some dice, I think, and every employee was assigned a number, and everyone
Right.
knew that we were doing the key ceremony on the 18th and that they should have their phone by their bed and on, and then call them if they were selected.
Yeah.
Um,
There were. So, how many of? I'm trying to think
I
of
think it
like.
was
There's you and me, obviously. There was like 4 or 5, like maybe just we tried to minimize the number of people who knew they were going to be there. It was like
yeah,
you, me, Will, or someone along the.
it was
Yeah.
you, me, Will, and Curtis and Eric had to be there because you guys were
Oh
all
yeah,
off.
because we're officers. Yeah.
Yeah, and the only way to open a safety deposit box and have someone put something in it is you had to be an officer of the company.
Right. Right. And then we all went to separate locations, right? So, and then so right, so there's 5 of us, and then we brought in, and then the other 5 people were going to be randomized, basically, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. That seems correct. But wait, we skipped over a lot of so in the lead up to that morning, like
Mhm.
we had to basically prep all of the relevant equipment. And so that meant,
Tons of equipment. Every single minute of the day was accounted for. I had
right,
gone through and figured out how long it takes a sheet of paper to print, how long it takes to bag something, how long we would be in there, because
right,
ultimately at the end of the day, we had selected locations that require you fly to them
right,
in order
right,
to
right,
uh, store the devices. So we had a timer. We basically had a time limit that we had to get to the safety deposit boxes before the banks closed. So we
right.
started at like 6 in the morning, I think 5:30, 6
Yeah,
in the
yes,
morning.
yeah,
And every single minute of the day was accounted for with a backup plan. So
right,
if 3 inkjet printers, without Wi-Fi capabilities, all, if one of them broke, what would we do? If
right,
2 of them broke, what would we do?
right,
Every single like possible, risk was accounted for.
right.
The timeline.
So that timeline is a huge, like, sort of like there's a huge amount of effort that goes into that timeline and that sort of operational outline. And then it's
Yes.
also securing all of the relevant hardware, like all the relevant equipment, and then also security sealing and like everything that I just remember everything that we got in the lead up to this. The chain of custody for that is also super important. So
Oh,
every
loved.
night that had to live in the office, it had to like live in a safe that only the officer of the company had access to or whatever. And like
Yes.
every step of
Really?
modifying those things.
I remember because he had to lock the computer up. He was kind of
Sorry.
responsible. Will,
Oh
uh,
yeah, yeah,
the
yeah,
computers he was working on, because I was just doing light planning. But yeah, I think
yeah.
he actually took the chain of custody. I didn't know too much about that, but a lot more
Okay,
careful.
that was. I mean, I just remember that there was a lot of like properly air gapping a computer and also making sure that not only that, like basically that one of the risks is that if it's known that you like where you don't want anyone to know that you bought it or where you bought it from.
Someone was
And so
tracking us and watching us. How could we prevent them from knowing we bought the
they don't
computers? I did
they
go to
just
bed.
don't, you don't want them to know like what computer that you use basically
Yeah,
if there's a potential for some computer to be compromised, like maybe there's some problem with whatever, like the entropy generation, and we didn't use any entropy from computers, but whatever, there's some backdoor into an existing computer. You don't even want people to know what computer, so we would send, I remember a few different people like randomized Best
yes,
Buys in the Bay
yeah,
Area to go and buy equipment, bring it
yeah.
back, tear it down. Like the first thing you do is take it apart, pull out all of the like anything that does networking,
Yep.
basically. Um, and then you basically, these things were just like covered in security seals because you would then seal them back up such that it was clear that anyone had tampered with them.
Yeah.
Um, and so that, and then all of that stuff went into these locked black. duffel bags basically that had to live in another
Oh
locked
my God, I
location in
forgot
the
about the
office.
duffel bags.
Oh, those are the best. That was because we
My
had on the day, we had to look, they were huge because it's like printers, computers, paper, like, and then all of the equipment to also then go and destroy all of this equipment because we had to then basically like make it impossible to ever
Yes.
reuse this stuff.
Not only was it
Um,
impossible to trace us from the start, you had to not be able to trace us back in either
right.
from the end. Yeah. Forgot about the duffel bags. Yeah, we had 3 duffel bags. Everything was organized by each group, and each group was responsible for their set of shards.
Right.
Uh,
Right. Yeah, yeah. And then the shards would go to separate physical
yeah,
locations.
turned each person into a team. It was like you were a team, Curtis was a team, and Eric was a team.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. And so those teams, I think, were also randomized. But now I think, okay, that's all the lead up to the day, right? So the day of the, I remember, obviously I was going to be there, and I think it was like 5 or 5:30. It's like 5:30, we met at the office, the 5 core people. We had a list of employees. Everybody knew, have your phone on, we may call you. And then we
yes.
did literally roll die. Everyone's just like numbered. You roll a 12-sided die or whatever it is, and basically pick someone, call them, tell them to get in here as quickly as they could.
Yep.
Um, then we all changed. So the insider risk, of course, is like that you are somehow recording ceremony or whatever. You're collecting data. So we had everybody basically change into jumpsuits that were all exactly like matching jumpsuits.
Matching Dickies, I
Yeah,
remember.
which is part of why that image is amazing.
Yeah.
Um,
I'll send it to you.
yeah, please do. We got to find that camera because yeah, that's amazing. Um, uh,
I
Everybody
also just
shows
want
up.
whatever later in the day at the end, a picture of the hard drive that we drilled through.
There we
Uh,
go. You're,
yes.
you're getting
I don't
uh,
turn off my notifications.
D
Um,
D. I'm a D&D devotee.
you are.
Um,
Well, I
all
don't
the time.
usually use this computer for things like this. Wait,
It's a
anyway.
Anyway, everyone else shows up, everybody changes, and what I remember is walking out of the office. So then we had pre-booked 3 or 5 locations. So then you also roll the dice to pick a location, which was just like a rental conference room, basically, that we were going to spend the day. Um, Roll a dice, pick one, book an Uber, and then we all walked out all at once in matching black jumpsuits, carrying 3 giant black locked duffel bags, and we all got in the elevator at like quarter of 7 or something like that, or 6:30. And I
Yeah.
remember the elevator came down to the bottom floor, and the doors opened, and there was one person standing in the lobby, and like we all walked out
It was like a
together.
full heist. Like anyone
Yeah.
who saw this was like, should I call the police now? Like,
Yeah.
please
And then
no.
we walked out the door and into like an Uber X, like a set of waiting like Uber XLs
Yes,
that then took us
yes,
to like where we needed to go.
yes,
Uh, which ended up being this kind of random room in downtown San Francisco somewhere.
yes. I had looked on the Breather app and found that there was like 4 or 5 different locations. I had emailed with Breather, like they're never really rented this early in the morning. And I was like,
Right.
on the day of, we'll roll, a dice or something and we'll select one,
Right.
essentially. This was
Right.
probably
Right.
one of the lower, uh, one of the harder ones. I was worried about like someone could find us, and know our location. But we needed a location that wasn't, no one had been to before, no one was familiar with, didn't
Right.
have a Wi-Fi network anyone had ever connected to.
Right.
Um, and we took everyone's phones. Forgot
I
this
think at the
thing,
beginning of the day, right?
right?
Like the beginning of the day at the office, everyone takes their phone,
Everyone's
puts it in
phone.
priority.
We had
Okay.
them turn
Yeah.
them off, and then we
Yeah.
put them in the cages and like a
Yeah.
lock bag.
Yeah. Right. And that stayed in a safe at the office. Um, So then once you've gotten to we got to the breather and then our main job is to both generate entropy, like a bunch of basically random numbers, and then take that random numbers and divide it up into whatever, basically however many hundreds of pieces that we needed it to, and then
Yes.
use the software that we had built basically that would take an input of a random number, generate an entire hierarchy of crypto wallets from that, and then generate paper collateral. This is obviously running on an air-gapped computer, and then send that to these air-gapped inkjet printers. And then we had this sort of whole physical process by which people would check to make sure that they were legible, figure out which went in which bags, bag everything, number everything.
Each
So,
shard had a label.
Yeah.
and it was the name of the galaxy, one of three, and we had brought only the exact amount of labels we needed. Every
Right.
label had to be used, and that was our checksum basically for
R-
the day.
right. Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
And then
Yeah,
each,
that's
each one had a bag, and exactly it printed out. They made sure it was legible. It was the exact one it said it was, and then it had to go into a security bag.
right.
Um, and then it
It's
had
like
to
a tamper evident bag,
seal.
basically.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. And
Um,
then it went into like a folder, like or like a box. I think we had for each one, because one of the biggest challenges with this actually was that we had to physically fit everything inside of a safety deposit box, which is
right.
quite small.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
Even though we got the largest one you could get, it just really was not designed for the service. We didn't want to have multiple boxes.
Yeah.
Um,
Thinking about it now, actually, one of our problems was probably like the printing everything on 8.5 by 11, like because
just cut,
those what's that?
you mean we could have cut the paper?
Oh, just like you could have made the format, like the key material that we need, like the master seeds are like tiny, right? They could have been like index card size,
There was
basically,
a lot
instead
of
of,
stuff on the paper.
yeah.
I
But I'm
think we
saying
were
none of that
trying,
stuff is that important.
yeah, we could have cut stuff. You're right.
Um, because yeah, I had to fuss with those bags and pieces. I mean, it's no longer a thing, but like,
I think
they were
we
very
could have
big.
made everything smaller. You're probably pretty right about that. I don't know why we didn't.
I've
Maybe
just
I
never
was
thought about that before.
everything, and then having pieces, and then having to deal with pieces missing, and then they're small.
Yeah. The amazing thing is we never lost anything. Like nothing was fucked up in this process. Like literally not a single thing, and we would know, you know?
Remember, there was a scare. I remember we were missing something, and it was like a miscount because we would do the checks. So like we'd print out everything, we'd put them in the bags, and then one person's job was just to keep track of everything and count them all. We were like
Yeah.
short one or two, I think, in Curtis's, and I was like, "What did you do?"
I mean, it was extremely confusing. I mean, it was the funny thing is that then I remember coming home at the end of the day and just being like, I just worked a day like in a factory, you know, like it's like I
You
was
were
like exhausted. It was so tiring.
I couldn't tell everyone all the policy in advance. So I had to explain everything to you guys as we
Yeah,
were
yeah,
doing it. So there was like a lot of on the ground, like, and none of it was rational. You're like, wait, what? We have to tape this thing and we can only use this tape
yeah.
and we have to use this label. Like, it didn't make a lot of sense, in the moment,
It's
I think.
actually there's this one of our advisors who I absolutely love has this like his back of the napkin constraint on growing a company is that you shouldn't grow in headcount more than 20% year over year. And I don't know, that's just like his guiding principle. And when I
Yeah,
remember being like, why is that? He's like, look, it's simple. Let's say like Navy SEALs bust down the door into the Tlon office and they're like, all of you, 10 of you, we're going on a raid. Let's go. If it's the 10 of you and like two Navy SEALs, you all die. If instead they take all 10 of you and they divide you up onto separate teams where there's like three of you and like seven Navy SEALs, you all live because they can tell you what to do and like you can whatever, you just like figure it out and there's like enough knowledge transfer. But like
yeah,
figuring out like what that sweet spot is, it's interesting because it's like if you had done this whole thing and it was like you were the only person that knew and you had nine other people who didn't know, it would have probably been even whatever. Like it's like I guess it's relatively mechanical, but that the fact that we knew mostly whatever there was like enough people there to actually know what to do uh, made it such that it actually worked because it's true that it's like a pretty complicated process.
yeah, there was a lot of checking, but I think also we were very time limited. I was
Right.
worried that we weren't going to make it. If one of the locations that was ended up being selected that day was far, we had to get on a plane. They had to get there before the location closed. So we had this like
Yeah,
tight
and they had to buy plane
time.
tickets, right? How did that work? Because like I do, yeah, there was another team that went further away to get to a safety. There were two further away locations actually, right? No, no, no. There's one further away location, two
One,
locations in the Bay, one
two
further away.
locations in the Bay, and then one of the locations was San Diego.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Which is why you live in San Diego now.
that's right. All because of this key ceremony. um, yeah,
But did
deployment.
those? How did those? Everyone
Yeah.
had to buy those tickets, basically.
I was just, as you mentioned it earlier, I was trying to remember how we did it. I think we just used the company card. I'm trying to remember at the end of the day, we just resolved that we had to use these three locations.
Yeah.
That was, you couldn't create enough entropy here because there just isn't really that many. There's
Yeah,
enough
yeah.
bank.
Well,
There's
one of the
enough bank.
constraints, right, yeah, is that you want to be split between banks, which are regulated, and
Yes.
private vaults, which are have different regulatory framework.
Right.
We've always been like pretty confident that we're safe in general from a regulatory standpoint, but it seemed like if for whatever reason, the regulatory regime in the US changed,
Yeah.
you want it to also be like in a,
Two privates, one bank.
yeah. Um, and so that like constrained us completely too. I went for a run earlier and I just found a tick on me, so I'm like now
Wait, what?
it's tick. I mean, it's just that's there's no Lyme disease here. It's fine.
Okay.
I mean, there's very little Lyme disease here. It's totally normal for this time of year, but usually I'll find them. That was like hours ago. So
Uh,
anyway, sorry, just distracted. Okay, wait. The other thing we're skipping over, which I always loved, is like so you need these giant. The whole point of this is generate this giant random number, and our
yes.
methodology for generating a giant random number was to take snow globes that were full of black glitter and to mix them up and then take video of them on like an old school DV cam that had no Wi-Fi capability and then
Yes.
take those files, like the actual just bits of those files, and you would just take random samples out of those files and feed that into your basically like wallet generator.
That's right. All
Yeah.
galaxies are made of stardust, which in our case was glitter
Yeah.
universe.
Those were beautiful, and those things sat in the office for a long time, and I always thought that was also like, it's like such a, I don't know, it's wonderful when these like really technical things like terminate in something
Yeah,
extremely
I think so
simple, right?
too. It's really, really poetic.
Yeah, like you can't because you're like obviously a computer random number generator is sort of like doesn't make sense because computers aren't random, and so you have to have this like physical source of entropy. Well, what is that? And like
Yeah,
yeah, snow globe's actually like pretty good.
glitter, water.
Cloudflare famously like does the lava lamps. The lava lamps are
Yes.
good too.
I
Um,
really do want to copy them with the lava lamps. We'll do glitter
we thought
globes.
about lava lamps, but the problem with
Yes.
lava lamps is that they're too fucking slow. And so
Yeah, they take a long time to heat up. Yeah,
yeah,
and move.
so the snow obviously a snow globe needs to be moved around, but that was fine for our purposes because you could just like shake it and do it again, do it again.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so we printed all these things out, which took hours, right? Like it took a while. Yeah,
It took a while because we had to use those slow printers. I looked
yeah,
into trying to find the fastest inkjet printers on the planet. They just don't
yeah.
really exist. No one really needs printers that aren't online anymore. They were hard
Right,
to
right, right.
find.
Right. Yeah, they were
Yeah.
really slow. And like once I'm also thinking I'm like, did we? Because you couldn't leave, right? So it was like we didn't. I remember we didn't eat. Like it was the whole day, and you
Oh yeah,
couldn't leave, or do we?
I remember I brought food and there was like shifts basically, and it was like your
Right.
group can snack now.
Yeah. Okay,
I
that's
was
how it
like
worked. Yeah,
on
that
the
makes sense.
clock. You have 5 minutes to eat that sandwich. Yeah.
I just had this really clear memory of like we finally bagged everything up, and then everything went into these like locked Pelican cases. I guess we bought
Yeah.
everybody who needed plane tickets, sent, and like as we were walking out, I remember walking into just this random. I remember being starving, and I walked into this convenience store that was just downstairs from and there was this group of just classic 100% normal girls like talking about like whether they like why they loved Hershey bars, I think, or something like that. Do you know what I mean? And like,
You're like, do
yeah,
you know
it's
where
like,
I've been?
yeah, like you're like, wow, like you just walk like these, these different dimensions are like somehow totally like perfectly interleaved or something like
Yeah,
that.
literally.
Uh, but yeah, I remember we all that like towards the end we were kind of in a hurry because everybody had to go to their like
Yes.
respective endpoints,
Yeah.
and mine was in the Bay. Obviously, I
Yes.
don't remember. I didn't get on a plane.
You were at the
Uh,
Chase. I think Curtis went to the South Bay and Eric went to San Diego.
okay, yeah, that sounds right.
Eric and Karina,
Uh,
I think, went to San Diego.
Wait, Karina was there?
Karina was there, yeah. Maybe Karina
For
was with you.
real?
Karina was with you. Yeah, she's in the picture.
Damn, that's crazy. Like, I don't remember that. Seriously?
Well, look,
How do I
she's in
not?
the picture. Can you see?
Yeah, I can see.
Yeah.
Uh, she must have not been what team? I don't even remember what.
Wait,
There's a
no,
lot of stuff I don't
I
remember.
think I put her on Curtis's team. I was a little worried about him. Like, just it was a lot of logistics.
I mean,
Um,
Yeah, it's funny how like Curtis, great software architect, like, but so bad at like yeah, anything like super detail oriented. And I mean, he was like he knew that about himself. I feel like he's
Yeah,
like,
he's
no, no,
like
no, no,
very
don't make me do
self-aware,
that.
very self-aware. Yeah, he's like, don't give me responsibility, but he had to be there because he was an officer, so we
Yeah,
had to have him. So I think I put Karina with him, maybe, and they did the South Bay, and it was like
Okay, yeah,
Eric
makes sense.
and maybe
I think Eric and Ted went to San Diego.
yeah, Ted and Ted. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Um, and yeah, I wonder if I remember where Morgan maybe was on your in your group. Yeah, so then
I remember
everyone
setting that up, but
get to
yeah,
their location. I didn't go
yeah,
with any groups. I remember this part was hard for me because I was like, I can't
yeah,
see, I know visibility.
right,
Um, you guys all got your phones back. I think I booked the tickets to the airport on the flight. I had
yeah,
everyone's birthdays beforehand. I'd gotten everyone's personal information. I
yeah,
used like a credit card that was like a cash card to like buy all the tickets.
yeah.
Uh, and I think
Oh, and then wait, then no, that's why we split up, right? So we're like 10 people at the beginning, but then it's like 6 people who go to the locations, and then the 4 remaining had to destroy everything because we also had to start drilling drives and stuff, right?
yes, yeah, the
Yeah,
ones that you guys only had to go local.
right,
So we had more time. So
right,
then we got, yeah, the drills out. We had special drill bits. We had a drill, and like you could put holes through the entire hard drive,
yeah,
multiple holes. Yeah, and
yeah,
then we had hammers, and we just like destroyed the equipment
right.
basically.
Yeah, yeah. I really wanted to like do the Will It Blend video, but it seemed like it was too toxic, and there was so much. It was a lot of
There
stuff.
was a
Like,
lot of stuff. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
It was everything.
um,
The printers, the computers,
right,
um,
yeah.
and it's quite hard to drill through them. Yeah, we did it in the
Yeah, I was in the
room.
office. I remember. I brought like I remember bringing in like an extra piece of lumber or something so we could like it was like
Yes.
the
Yeah, they
like
used wood to drill.
thing.
Yeah, as a
Yeah,
base for drilling through destroying everything. Yeah, and then we kept all the destroyed drives in a locked bag.
right. Just yeah, because you didn't want to leak anything that you didn't have to, basically.
Yeah, I looked
And
into it more, and it wasn't worth it to get them like machined into like a cube.
right, right, yeah, right. Well, yeah, what I really wanted to do was basically take that entire all of that stuff and put it in a gigantic, just melt it down into something.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, that never happened.
it's definitely
I,
less special now. So maybe it's time to move on. Are you still in the office down there?
no, I'm at home. I'm at home. I'm not in the office.
You just have
I
this really
look
nice
like
block wall.
yeah, it's so funny the way this setup is because like I'm looking out over the forest with no sign of human inhabitation, and I look like I'm like in a prison.
You do look like you're in a prison.
Yeah.
I didn't want to say anything.
uh,
Galen, blink five
uh,
times.
yeah,
Um,
no, I'm all I can FaceTime you and show you around in a little bit. I think that basically is what that. I mean, yeah, the amazing thing is that somehow that whole process actually came together,
with the
and
rest of the pictures.
no bits were lost. Um,
I remember afterwards we were hungry, went to go eat in the mission, and I got a fortune cookie. I don't. Who was there with me? I think it was Jimmy. Jimmy and I.
yeah.
I have it. I saved a picture of it. It says, "This is a prosperous time in life for you."
That's awesome.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. And I think Jimmy had never bought a lottery ticket, so we bought a lottery ticket. Whoever I was with
amazing.
never bought a lottery. We were next to a convenience store. We'd stop for food after
Yeah,
everything was done. Our Mega Millions. Yeah, December 18th. So
December
funny.
18th.
I even have a picture of all the destroyed little pieces.
Oh, there you go. Oh yeah, like ripping all the.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
Um,
Surprised. I'll
I got
send
a
you
picture of
photos.
our receipt from Blue Vault. I got all the, and I guess this was, I decided, deemed safe. Uh,
I mean,
yeah.
after the fact, it seemed fine. Yeah, we didn't want to leak all those locations
I miss the
a
good
while ago.
mugs at our bit.
Oh, yeah. Wow, I forgot about that one.
It's cute.
I don't know if that's still there.
Yeah. I mean, it was a really incredible day.
It was a wild. It was wild. I mean, it was cool that it was. Um, it's
Right.
very rare that you do something that's like that much effort that you just don't ever tell anybody about, basically.
Well,
uh,
every shard had a number
yeah,
attached.
yeah. Those bags. I mean, I still
Yeah.
remember those bags. Those were like cash. They were like cash drop bags that had these like. So they're like rubber bag or like you know plastic bags that you like seal shut. Like you, there's no way to get into them without destroying them. So they're like tamper evident, basically.
Yeah.
Uh,
My day before to-do list. That's
Do you
a
still
whole lot.
have, does that airbag gapped computer must be in the office somewhere? I like that operations plan is like, we should put that up somewhere basically. Yeah. Send me some of those photos. I forgot. I'll try and go find that camera next time I go to the office. Like I think I know where it is. It's like in that crawl space in the office. Uh, I
I
think there's some
totally
other,
forgot about that camera being there.
well, because I was like, yeah, I don't think I believed that this needed to be like a short film, but I did think it was worth documenting.
Yeah,
And so
yeah. No,
that
it
I remember,
is.
yeah, we were trying to figure out who like had a camera where you could actually take pictures that weren't gonna like,
It
somehow
really
dox
was
you.
such a spectacular day. I feel like I hope we captured the kind of like massive amount of preparation, the careful execution, the tediousness of the entire thing.
I mean, we
Um,
at least now have recorded like what actually happened because there's stuff that in there that I will like definitely not remember in like 4 or 5 years. Um,
for sure not. I feel like I already lost a lot of it. Just even
yeah,
remembering the duffel bags, packing them beforehand. I had like a checklist. I mean, it was really thorough.
yeah.
Everything had a checklist. Everything was accounted for. I,
I
you
mean, you
know,
can't, it's just like you absolutely cannot fuck anything up. Like, it's a totally, there's no like room for error, like at
I
all.
do remember like not sleeping 2 weeks before I'd wake up in the middle of the night, like, oh, what if this happens? Like, I would spend a lot of
Yeah,
time Googling like all risks to archival paper. What's the storage temperature inside the bank vault? Like, what are the threat models of buying these things from Uline? Okay, we need to buy extra and then pick a selection of numbers we're going to use because Uline, calling Uline, understanding what their security practices are, who has access to all the materials.
yeah.
Like, it was just every little thing hunting down every detail.
It's interesting now, like, because I feel like there's so much of this stuff that at the time, yeah, like you don't know if you can do it. And now that like we have done stuff like that, like, and plenty of things like that, like it's a kind of thing that's like very hard to have the confidence that you know how to do. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's no way to know if you know how to do this, even if you kind of like went to school for it or whatever. It's
Well,
like
yeah.
like
Like
you have
that
to just
was,
like actually do it.
yeah,
And that was one was, yeah, it's like extremely hard. The funny thing for me is that I think there was a point at which I realized, like, look, the only way you're going to know if you screwed this up is like at the point where it all basically falls apart because like somehow there's some, you're going to find out when like assets start like disappearing or whatever, right? Like,
yeah,
and that is a weird thing, like it's very rare to work on something that's just like it's ultra high stakes, but it's not like maybe you just die or whatever,
yeah,
like something catastrophic happens in the
yes,
process of trying to do
yes,
it. It's like
yes,
that thing is going to happen way down the line. It's so weird also because we knew we were going to announce the contracts being on the chain like on the 8th. And so they also, I think that then once we did this, we could begin our actual deployment. And that took a week, I think, of
yeah,
just because we were slowly basically sending transactions. And so I think the entire thing was completed before the holidays. And so
yeah.
we had these 3 weeks where actually the contracts were completely live, but nobody knew that they were live. And it was also weird because it was like, you didn't know if we had fucked something up in the process, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
they were just kind of like sitting
I
there.
also feel like this spectacular thing happened and we couldn't tell anyone about it.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
It's
yeah,
living inside of you. You're like, oh, this crazy thing. You're like, what'd you do yesterday? You're like, oh, nothing.
yeah, 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 yeah. I mean, that was definitely like something where, yeah,
Or even
that,
like we couldn't tell the other employees. It was like half the
yeah,
team experienced this thing and the other half had
yeah, yeah,
no concept.
yeah. It was really strange. Um, it's amazing that it all. I mean, the other thing is that the thing you weren't there for is that then, yeah, when we would have to like pull stars out of storage or whatever, you'd have to go to these vaults and go and actually pull get a piece of paper. Our relationship to those vaults is always so funny. Like you're like, I need to come in and I'm gonna be here for like half an hour. Uh, I don't know. Just always seemed like it's like, what in the fuck could you possibly be doing here? Those people obviously are in the business of providing security too,
Yeah.
so it's like not that weird. But you have to go and find the thing and then
I
pull it
remember
out and then
getting a call one day from when we like shortly after. I think you went and we had to write down uh the phrase.
yeah.
And I remember being there and being like, please, please, like
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, like I hope
just
this
like
actually works. Yeah,
I'm
because it's
not
like you're like one
messing up.
character off, like, But yeah, all that. So then, yeah, when we moved all of this stuff, the reason we know both A, that this works, and B, that this is now deprecated, right, is that we moved everything, we like cycled keys. And so in order to actually complete those transfers, you're basically checking, because I always had this anxiety of like, okay, we know that all the things were deployed to some wallet address, like to some number, but like we didn't go through and then take every shard out and then reach. I mean, we did before we sent everything. Like, everything was like triple checked beforehand, but then you
Yeah.
put it in a vault and like, I don't know, it just feels wrong. You're like, is there any way for me to check on this? But cycling the keys was like, okay, everything's fine. Like, it was totally done correctly, which is amazing.
Yeah.
Um,
There's so much relief to hear that the first time. I was like, "Ooh, all right." I don't know how I can do that again, like right now.
it's funny
I
how
also
yeah,
remember
I wonder how it's done with like exchange. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I was remembering that it was hard to get the box at the Chase. We ended up going with like the Chase private banking services. And I remember
Yeah,
like
yeah.
me telling you, like, Galen, like we got to dress up like we're like adults and go to this like bank, and we can't tell
Yeah,
them we're like they kept asking a lot of questions about what kind of startup
yeah,
we were. And it was like
yeah, yeah.
still too early before everyone really knew about crypto.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think we were one of so many though. I remember the guy asking like who we work for and whatever, and seemed like, I think it's, yeah. I remember a bank employee at some point being like, "Oh, like asking me for like almost like trading alpha on some crypto shit," and I was like,
yeah,
"Dude, like you never fucking saw me here. Like, what are you? Do not,
yeah,
don't
no,
talk to me about that."
it
Uh,
was strange.
it was really weird, but now I think it's insanely common. Like, it's
Oh,
strange how,
super common. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
my
For sure.
relationship with all those employees now is like, I feel like at first, yeah, they were always like, "I don't know about these guys," and now they're like, "Oh, you're just
I
you're
remember
one
like
of
putting on
many
high
people."
heels. I'm like, we have to look like adults in the bank.
uh, yeah, I didn't really think about that, but it's a good thing that you were thinking about it.
I
I think
was,
I was just worried. I was just worried about them. No, I was like, I can't believe that should like, no, I don't know. It just seemed like a real like liability to even, like, the insider threat of the bank employee is so real. Like, that
yeah,
that uh,
yeah. Well, I remember the Wells Fargo wouldn't give us a vault for some reason. They were like full. Like a couple of the vaults just had
yeah,
no availability, and so I was
yeah,
panicking.
yeah.
And a friend of mine worked where was like a high up banker, and I asked him if he
Uh,
could get us into the bank.
yeah.
Um,
Oh, okay.
he's
Oh,
like,
that's how that worked out. That's
yeah,
amazing.
yeah. Yeah, because I was like, "Oh, shit, like it's actually quite hard to get a safety deposit box in San Francisco. Um,
Oh,
some of the banks have
yeah.
like waiting lists, so that's why we were like
Right.
private services or private client services, that like weird side
Yeah,
bank.
yeah.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
worked. I mean, yeah, I had to spend many hours there.
I didn't think you went so much. Like I just didn't see that.
Well, because anytime we would ever transact like on any of those assets, like whether you're like, I mean, even for like day-to-day management and stuff, because like as the network grows, like we would need to like issue planets, whatever, like, or we do these, those are like like the whole point was to say, look, and this is what we recommended. We didn't really talk about this, but like so for like, we're we were a large address space holder. There are other large address space holders too. So we built this software so that you could go and basically it would generate keys for you as securely as possible and give you some recommendations on how you should probably generate keys without trying to take on any liability there. But they would also do this thing where it would generate paper collateral for you. And the thinking was basically just that like, this is the like safest possible thing that you can do. Um, you know, if you knew what you were doing, maybe you could go the hardware wallet route, but that basically like paper shards are actually great.
Yeah,
And so lots of people did this, and I think lots of people followed this like same pattern. Certainly some of like our investors who were not crypto, like Urbit straddles this kind of like crypto and not crypto. And so for the
yeah,
kind of like not crypto people, they were like, all right. And it's like relatively easy to do. Like,
yeah.
it's not that complicated. You just can't lose those shards.
Wait,
Uh,
so where did you guys move to?
uh, well,
Can you
I
talk
can't
about
talk
it?
about that. I mean, I'll tell you. uh, but it's much better. I mean, it's much easier. It's much more widely distributed. So like the distribution of keys is like insane. So I was always worried about three shards is really not that much, you know?
Yeah,
Um, and it really isn't. We had endless debates about that technically, and I knew that it wasn't quite enough, but it was also pretty hard. There's some technical bottlenecks around going after like Shamir sharding for some of the key types that we were using, and so it was like almost an engineering problem where we like didn't really want to go and solve that problem. So we ended up going after two of three. I think I'm remembering that correctly.
I'm like
Um,
remembering thinking like, well, if there's an earthquake or a
yeah,
fire,
yeah, yeah,
what's
yeah,
our risk? And then we have to be in a place where there's no earthquakes.
yeah. I mean, I was like, but
Physical.
you're also like, you just want to like call the bank every couple of days and be like, so the box is still there, right? Like, who knows that? Uh, but yeah, we moved to the system now is just so much better.
Yeah, but you also we had key. Where did you guys keep? I'm trying to remember. We kept the keys somewhere too because you had physical keys
Yeah,
for the in a
yeah,
safe and like
yeah,
only certain people had access.
yeah, yeah. All that stuff was in a safe, and like that. I mean, the thing is that right. There's a whole chain of so it's like you have a safe that only certain people have access to that's insured, that's extremely physically difficult to get into.
Yeah.
And then but then going to the all of these places like authenticate you, right?
Yeah.
So they're not just like, do you have the key, but you need identification, only
Yeah.
certain people are allowed in, they record you coming in and out and stuff like that, so the idea being that you could at least audit if something did go
Yeah. I
missing.
remember making that
um,
decision that the key wasn't actually that important.
yeah, and they're explicit about that. That's their whole security model too,
Right.
right? Is like they expect like the key, I mean, it's a copyable key. um, Obviously, you don't want someone to copy it, but then anyway, yeah, that stuff all worked out. Um, I think we did it. What else are we
Right.
missing?
I'm so
Yeah,
glad we did it. You've been wanting to do it for so long.
I just like feel like dude. A, it was a great thing that I like, and B, it's like something we have worked hard on and want other people to know about. And yeah, like I think in 10 years it'll be like you'll be like, wait, what happened? You're like, oh, okay, at
Sometimes
least we've
when I
like,
just think about it, I think about the time I spent 2 months planning a party I couldn't tell anyone about.
yeah, yeah, that is
A weird
exactly what it
party
was
for
like.
10 people.
Yeah. Anyway, I think we
But
handled
if
it.
anyone wants help with the key ceremony or has any questions, let me know.
Yeah, yeah, happy to talk about it. I wonder who that's what I was thinking, or I was kind of interrupting a minute ago. It's like there are some things still that would need this, right? Like, and I wonder, it'd be interesting to talk to how people actually pull it off. I remember talking to a friend who like works in the intelligence community about this, and he was like, yeah, like the number of people who actually have this problem, like, it's insanely few and far between. I think that the normative solution is that you just do M of n, where you have like, it's like, whatever, 70 of 90 keys, like this huge number of keys, right? And then the individual key generation is just so much less important or
Yeah.
whatever, right? For like anything really institutional. Um, and then in some cases, yeah, like IETF, probably exchanges and stuff like that, you're still handling key material. So we were in
Yeah.
like a pretty weird
It was a
place.
very niche thing.
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
We
Well,
definitely made
thanks
it
for your help.
unique. I think it was so much fun. I uh, I remember feeling like I just couldn't tell anyone about it. So I'm glad that that's off out there in the world now.
Finally. Um, I'm gonna go eat something.
That's a me
I
too.
think it's time for lunch. It's good to see you. Thanks for being up for doing
Thank you
this.
for having me.
Yeah, anytime. Next time we can talk about, I don't know, something
The
even weirder.
robots take over.
Oh, yeah, yeah, sure.